So a black man on a Ducati this expensive expects me to believe he actually owns it? Sergeant Travis Kessler sneered as he ripped the registration from Marcus Ellison's hand and slapped it against the hood of the patrol cruiser. Marcus remained still. Run the VIN. The registration matches. Kessler looked from Marcus's plain motorcycle jacket to the gleaming Ducati Panigale and laughed. Guys like you always have paperwork ready when the story doesn't add up. Officer Dylan Crow stared at the patrol computer. Sergeant, it's registered to Marcus Ellison. Kessler ignored him and stepped closer. Take away that expensive bike, and you're just another nobody trying to act important. Marcus's jaw tightened. Kessler grabbed his wrist. And don't give me that calm voice. Men like you always think acting educated means the rules suddenly stop applying. He twisted Marcus's arm behind his back and snapped on the cuffs. A woman nearby raised her phone. Marcus never resisted. You still have time to correct this. Kessler shoved him toward the cruiser. Save your speeches for the courtroom. Hours later, Kessler watched Marcus enter a federal courtroom. Federal marshals stood. Attorneys rose. Then the entire room came to its feet. Kessler went pale, because the black man he had humiliated was about to reveal exactly who he was. Stay to see what happens when arrogance finally meets justice. Comment your city and local time below, and subscribe if you believe dignity belongs to everyone. 6 hours before the federal courtroom rose to its feet, Marcus Ellison stood alone in his garage, listening to the soft ticking of an old silver watch. It had belonged to his father, Raymond. The leather strap was worn almost smooth. A scratch crossed the glass near the number 4, left there decades earlier when Raymond had reached too deeply into the engine of an old Chevrolet. Marcus smiled faintly as he fastened it around his wrist. Still keeping me on time, he whispered. Outside, Maryland was waking beneath a pale Monday sky. Marcus pulled on a simple black motorcycle jacket, dark jeans, and riding boots. Nothing about his appearance suggested wealth or influence. That was exactly how he preferred it. At 48, Marcus had spent most of his adult life in rooms where expensive suits and impressive titles often mattered more than character. On a motorcycle, none of that mattered. His Ducati Panigale waited beneath the garage lights. To Marcus, it wasn't a status symbol. It was freedom. His father had introduced him to motorcycles when Marcus was 16, teaching him how to listen to an engine before touching a wrench. Machines don't care who you are, Raymond once told him. Treat them right, and they'll tell you the truth. Marcus never forgot that. He started the Ducati. The engine came alive. 20 minutes later, he was moving through morning traffic toward downtown. Several miles away, Sergeant Travis Kessler sat behind the wheel of a patrol cruiser. Officer Dylan Crow occupied the passenger seat. Crow had been on patrol less than 3 years. Kessler had nearly 2 decades behind the badge. That difference mattered. Kessler expected younger officers to listen. Crow usually did. There. Kessler suddenly nodded toward the intersection ahead. Crow looked up. Marcus waited at a red light on the Ducati. What? That bike. Crow glanced at it. Nice. More than nice. Those things cost serious money. The light turned green. Marcus accelerated smoothly with traffic. Kessler pulled out behind him. Crow noticed. He do something? Not yet. Crow turned toward Kessler. Then why are we following him? Kessler gave him an irritated glance. Because good police work starts before somebody gives you an invitation. Marcus noticed the cruiser after the second turn. He checked his speed. Perfectly legal. He changed lanes using his signal. The cruiser followed. At the next light, Marcus stopped. So did Kessler. Marcus looked briefly into his mirror. 2 officers. Nothing unusual. Still, something about the way the cruiser remained directly behind him made an old discomfort settle into his chest. He remembered being 11 years old, sitting beside his father during a traffic stop. Raymond had kept both hands visible. Yes, officer. No, officer. Registration is in the glove compartment, officer. Marcus remembered asking afterward why his father had sounded so careful. Raymond had looked at him for several seconds before answering. Because sometimes getting home matters more than proving you're right. Marcus pushed the memory away. The light changed. He continued. Kessler followed another half-mile. Crow checked the dashboard. Speed's fine. Kessler said nothing. Lane changes are fine too. Still nothing. Then the cruiser's lights flashed. Marcus saw them immediately. He slowed, signaled, and pulled onto a wide shoulder well away from traffic. He shut off the Ducati, removed his gloves, placed both hands visibly on the fuel tank. Kessler stepped from the cruiser. Crow followed. Marcus waited. Kessler approached from behind and stopped beside him. License. Marcus turned his head slightly. Good morning, officer. May I ask why I was stopped? I said license. Marcus studied him for a moment, then slowly reached toward his jacket. My wallet is inside my left pocket. Kessler rested a hand near his belt. Then get it. Marcus removed his wallet and handed over his license. Kessler looked at the card, then at Marcus, then at the Ducati. Marcus Ellison? Yes. This motorcycle yours? Marcus paused. Yes. Kessler walked around the Ducati as though inspecting evidence. You buy it new? I don't understand how that relates to the stop. Kessler smiled without warmth. Simple question. Marcus looked toward Crow. The younger officer seemed uncomfortable already. I purchased it legally, Marcus said. Kessler crouched near the motorcycle, examining the bodywork. No temporary plate, because it isn't a temporary registration. How long have you owned it? Sergeant. Marcus's voice remained controlled. You have my driver's license. If you need my registration and insurance, I'll provide them. But I'd still like to know why you stopped me. Kessler straightened. For the first time, irritation appeared openly on his face. You always ask this many questions? When I'm stopped without being told why, yes. Crow glanced at Kessler. Sergeant, maybe we should just... Kessler raised one hand. Crow stopped. Kessler leaned slightly toward Marcus. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to answer my questions, and I'm going to decide what happens next. Marcus held his gaze. The road noise seemed to fade. He knew this moment. Not this officer. Not this road. But the choice. Push back and risk escalation. Stay calm and hope procedure eventually defeated prejudice. His father's voice returned. Getting home matters more than proving you're right. Marcus slowly reached into the motorcycle's document compartment. Registration and insurance, he said. He handed them over. Kessler examined the registration. The name matched. Marcus Ellison. The address matched his license. Everything appeared correct. Crow leaned closer. Looks good. Kessler didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the Ducati again, then back at Marcus. His suspicion should have ended there. It didn't. Step off the motorcycle. Marcus's expression changed. Why? Because I'm telling you to. Is there a problem with my documentation? Kessler took one step closer. Off the bike. Marcus slowly dismounted. He removed his helmet. Kessler finally saw his face clearly. A composed black man with touches of gray at his temples, and none of the nervousness Kessler seemed to expect. Marcus placed the helmet on the seat. Now, he said quietly, will you tell me why I'm being detained? Kessler looked at the expensive motorcycle, then at Marcus's plain clothes. Something hardened behind his eyes. I've seen plenty of stolen vehicles with clean paperwork. Marcus stared at him. So you believe the motorcycle is stolen? I believe I'm going to find out. Then run the VIN. Kessler's jaw tightened. Marcus gestured toward the Ducati. Run the VIN. Run the registration. Verify the insurance. You'll have your answer. Crow looked between them. It was the simplest solution. Kessler knew it. Marcus knew it. But this had stopped being about verification. Kessler handed the paperwork to Crow. Run everything. Crow returned toward the cruiser. Marcus remained beside his Ducati. Kessler stayed directly in front of him. Neither man spoke. Then Marcus noticed something in Kessler's expression that troubled him far more than the flashing lights. The sergeant didn't look like a man waiting to discover the truth. He looked like a man waiting for the computer to confirm what he had already decided. Officer Dylan Crow slid into the patrol cruiser and entered Marcus Ellison's information. The response appeared almost immediately. Valid licensee. Valid insurance. Registered owner. Marcus Ellison. Crow checked twice. Then he entered the Ducati's VIN. No stolen vehicle alert. No warrant. Nothing suspicious. He looked through the windshield. Marcus stood beside the motorcycle with his hands visible, while Sergeant Travis Kessler watched him like a man guarding a prisoner. Crow stepped out. Sergeant. Kessler turned. Everything matches. Marcus heard him. Kessler's expression barely changed. The VIN? Clean. Run it again. I did. Crow lowered his voice. The bike is registered to Marcus Ellison. No warrants. Nothing. For a few seconds, silence settled over the roadside. Marcus expected Kessler to hand back his documents. Instead, the sergeant folded his arm. Where were you headed? Marcus stared at him. You've confirmed the motorcycle belongs to me. I asked where you were headed, and I'm asking whether I'm free to leave. Kessler stepped closer. Not yet. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was no longer a routine stop. You stopped me because you suspected the motorcycle was stolen, Marcus said. Your officer just confirmed it isn't. I never said that was the only reason. Crow looked sharply at him. Marcus noticed. What other reason? Kessler looked down at Marcus's jacket. Your behavior. My behavior? Suspicious behavior. Marcus almost laughed, but there was nothing amusing about it. I pulled over immediately. I kept my hands visible. I provided every document you requested. You've been argumentative since I walked up. Asking why I was stopped is not being argumentative. A car slowed in the nearest lane. Then another. People were noticing. On the sidewalk across the road, a woman carrying a coffee and laptop bag stopped. Her name was Rebecca Sloan. She had watched enough of the encounter to understand that something was wrong. Rebecca took out her phone. She began recording. Kessler noticed almost immediately. "Keep moving!" he shouted. Rebecca remained on the public sidewalk. "I'm not interfering." "Then don't." Marcus looked toward her only briefly. The presence of a camera changed something. Not in Marcus. In Kessler. The sergeant's shoulders stiffened. "Turn around." Marcus looked back at him. "For what purpose?" "I'm conducting an investigation." "Into what?" Kessler pointed toward the Ducati. "Possession of potentially stolen property." Crow stepped forward. "Sergeant, we already cleared the VIN." Kessler turned on him. "I heard you." "Then what are we investigating?" Kessler's eyes narrowed. "Officer Crow, go back to the cruiser." Crow hesitated. That hesitation lasted only a second, but Marcus saw it. So did Rebecca's camera. Crow slowly stepped away. Marcus remained calm. "Sergeant Kessler, I would like a supervisor." Kessler laughed. "You think asking for a supervisor is some magic phrase that makes me disappear?" "No. I think this stop has gone beyond its original justification." Something flashed across Kessler's face. Marcus had spoken too precisely, too confidently. "Are you a lawyer now?" Marcus didn't answer. Kessler moved closer. "Maybe that's your game. Buy an expensive motorcycle, memorize a few legal phrases, and intimidate cops into backing off." Marcus's expression hardened. "My occupation has nothing to do with whether you're following procedure." Rebecca moved her phone slightly higher. Kessler pointed toward Marcus. "Hands on the cruiser." Marcus didn't move. "Am I under arrest?" "I said hands on the cruiser." "Am I being detained?" "You've been detained since I stopped you." "On what reasonable basis now that the motorcycle has been verified?" Crow looked down. He knew the answer. There wasn't one. Kessler stepped into Marcus's personal space. "You don't get to interrogate me." "I'm not interrogating you." Marcus's voice remained almost unnervingly calm. "I'm asking you to explain the legal basis for extending this stop." Kessler's face reddened. "Legal basis?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "People watch courtroom shows, and suddenly everybody thinks they're a constitutional expert." Marcus said nothing. Kessler pointed toward the cruiser again. "Hands on the hood." Marcus slowly turned. Not because Kessler had convinced him, because Marcus could feel the encounter changing. He placed both palms on the hood. Kessler began patting down his jacket. Marcus looked straight ahead. "You do not have my consent to search me. I'm checking for weapons. My riding gear has already been visible throughout the stop." "Keep talking." Kessler searched his pockets. He removed Marcus's wallet. "Keys. Phone." Then his fingers touched the old silver watch on Marcus's wrist. Marcus instinctively pulled his hand slightly inward. Kessler immediately seized his arm. "Don't move." Marcus froze. "That watch belonged to my father." "Then stop moving." Rebecca's camera captured everything. Crow returned from the cruiser. "Sergeant." Kessler ignored him. "Sergeant." Dispatch confirmed it again. "Everything is clean." Kessler released Marcus's wrist, but instead of ending the stop, he looked at Crow with open anger. "I told you to wait in the cruiser." Crow swallowed. "Yes, Sergeant." Marcus turned his head slightly. "Officer Crow." Crow looked at him. "You verified the motorcycle?" Crow hesitated. Kessler answered first. "Don't speak to my officer." Marcus kept his eyes on Crow. "Is the motorcycle legally registered to me?" Crow's jaw tightened. "Yes." Kessler spun toward him. "Crove." But the word was already out. Rebecca had recorded it. Marcus slowly removed his hands from the hood. "Then I'm requesting your supervisor again." Kessler stepped forward and shoved Marcus's hands back down. "You don't decide when this stop ends." Rebecca gasped. Marcus straightened. "Do not put your hands on me without cause." That sentence changed everything. Kessler grabbed Marcus by the wrist. Crow moved forward. "Sergeant, wait." "Back off." Kessler twisted Marcus's arm behind him. Marcus grimaced but refused to struggle. "Am I under arrest?" "You wanted to make this difficult." Kessler reached for his handcuffs. Marcus heard the metallic click behind him. Rebecca continued recording. Crow stared at his supervisor, finally understanding that they had crossed a line that could not simply be erased from a report. Marcus turned his head as far as Kessler's grip allowed. His voice remained controlled. "For the third and final time, Sergeant, call your supervisor." Kessler opened the cuffs. "No." And as the first steel bracelet closed around Marcus Ellison's wrist, Crow realized the traffic stop was no longer about a Ducati. It was about whether he would remain silent while a man with authority manufactured a reason to use it. Kessler pulled Marcus's right arm higher behind his back. The first cuff was already locked around Marcus's wrist. Other hand. Marcus kept his left palm flat against the cruiser hood. "You have confirmed the motorcycle belongs to me," he said. "Tell me what crime you believe I committed." Kessler tightened his grip. "I'm done explaining myself to you. You haven't explained anything." The second cuff clicked shut. Rebecca Sloane's phone remained pointed directly at them. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. Not from fear, from memory. He was 11 again, sitting in the passenger seat of his father's Chevrolet while red and blue lights flashed across the windshield. Raymond Ellison had been ordered out of the car because an officer claimed he resembled someone they were looking for. Marcus remembered his father standing beside the road with his hands spread across the roof. He remembered wanting to shout. Raymond had looked through the window and given his son one small shake of the head. Later, after they were released without an apology, Raymond had said something Marcus carried for the rest of his life. "Dignity is what you keep when somebody else decides you don't deserve any." Marcus opened his eyes. Kessler was emptying his pockets onto the cruiser hood. Wallet, keys, phone, a folded handkerchief. Then Kessler noticed the silver watch. "Take it off." Marcus turned slightly. "No." Kessler stared at him. "What did you say?" "The watch stays with me unless you have a lawful reason to remove it." Kessler laughed. "There you go again." He reached for Marcus's wrist. Marcus pulled it back instinctively. Kessler immediately shoved him harder against the cruiser. Rebecca gasped. Crow stepped forward. "Sergeant, he's cuffed." "I can see that." Kessler unfastened the watch himself. Marcus's calm expression finally cracked. "Be careful with that." Kessler held it between two fingers. The leather strap was faded. "This?" His mouth curled. "You're riding a bike that costs more than some cars, and this is what you're worried about?" "It belonged to my father." Kessler tossed it onto the hood beside Marcus's keys. The watch struck the metal with a sharp clink. Marcus stared at it. "Don't touch it again." Kessler stepped closer. "Maybe your father should have taught you how to cooperate with police," Rebecca whispered. "Oh my God." Marcus slowly turned his head. For the first time, there was anger in his eyes. "My father taught me exactly how a man should behave when someone abuses authority." Kessler's smirk vanished. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've cooperated with every lawful request you've made." Marcus looked toward Crow. "Your own officer confirmed my license, insurance, registration, and VIN." Crow said nothing. "You searched me after the reason for this stop disappeared. I asked for a supervisor 3 times. Kessler grabbed Marcus by the shoulder and turned him toward the cruiser. "You're under arrest." "For what?" "Obstruction." Crow blinked. "Sergeant?" Kessler spun around. Not another word. But he didn't obstruct anything. Kessler stared at the younger officer. Crow lowered his eyes. Kessler smiled faintly. "Exactly." Marcus understood. Silence had won, at least for the moment. Kessler gathered Marcus's belongings and shoved them into a clear property bag. Marcus looked toward Rebecca. "Ma'am." Kessler tightened his grip. "Don't talk to her." Marcus ignored him. "Please keep the original recording." Rebecca nodded. "I will." Kessler pointed at her. "If you interfere with this arrest, you'll join him." "I'm standing on a sidewalk." "You've been warned." Rebecca did not lower the phone. Crow opened the rear door of the cruiser. Marcus stopped before getting inside. "My motorcycle." "It'll be impounded," Kessler said. "There is no legal basis to seize it." "Tell it to the judge." For one strange second, Marcus simply looked at him. Crow noticed the expression. Not fear, not helplessness. Something closer to disbelief. Then Marcus said quietly, "I intend to." Kessler shoved him into the back seat. The door slammed. Through the glass, Marcus watched a tow truck arrive 20 minutes later. A worker secured the Ducati while morning commuters passed. The motorcycle his father would have loved to see disappeared behind them. Marcus lowered his eyes toward his bare wrist. In the front seat, Crow stared at the computer. The screen still displayed the result. Registered owner, Marcus Ellison. No warrants, no alerts, nothing that justified what had happened. Kessler climbed behind the wheel. "Start your supplemental report." Crow didn't move. "About what?" Suspect became argumentative during a lawful investigative detention, repeatedly refused commands, made movements that raised officer safety concerns. Crow stared at him. "That isn't what happened." Kessler turned slowly. "You're 3 years into this job. I'm 18 years in. That doesn't change what happened." "No, it means I understand what happened better than you do." Both body cameras were recording. Kessler noticed. His expression changed for only a fraction of a second. Kessler started the cruiser. As they pulled away, Rebecca remained on the sidewalk, still filming. Marcus leaned back against the seat. His father's words returned once more. Dignity is what you keep. Kessler believed the handcuffs had taken Marcus's power away. Marcus knew better. And somewhere behind them, a stranger held another version of the truth in her phone. He remembered Raymond saying that truth rarely arrived with sirens or applause. Sometimes it waited quietly in receipts, witnesses, timestamps, and people who refused to look away when looking away would have been easier. You got anything else to say? Marcus met his eyes. Only this. Kessler waited. From the moment your officer confirmed that VIN, every decision you made left a trail. Kessler laute, you trying to scare me? No. Marcus looked out the window as the city moved past. I'm telling you that facts have a way of surviving people who try to rewrite them. Crow slowly turned toward the computer screen. For the first time that morning, Sergeant Travis Kessler stopped smiling. The patrol cruiser rolled through the station gates 20 minutes later. Marcus Ellison had spoken only once during the ride. Now Sergeant Travis Kessler opened the rear door and motioned toward the entrance. Out. Marcus stepped onto the pavement with his hands still cuffed behind him. Officer Dylan Crow followed several feet back, carrying the clear property bag containing Marcus's wallet, phone, keys, and his father's silver watch. Marcus looked at the bag. Please make sure the watch is documented. Kessler laughed. You worried somebody here wants that old thing? Marcus ignored him. Inside, fluorescent lights washed the booking area in a cold white glare. A booking officer named Karen Mitchell looked up from her computer. Charges? Obstruction and failure to comply during an investigative detention, Kessler answered. Marcus turned toward him. Failure to comply with what lawful order? Kessler pushed him toward the counter. You'll get your chance to complain. Karen looked from Marcus to Kessler. Any weapons recovered? No. Contraband? No. Outstanding warrants? Kessler hesitated. No. Karen's eyebrows lifted slightly. She began entering the information. Marcus watched every keystroke he could see. Kessler noticed. You memorizing the place? I'm paying attention. That's your problem. You think you're smarter than everyone in the room. Marcus looked directly at him. No, Sergeant. I think details matter. Crow lowered his eyes. Kessler walked toward a nearby desk and opened the incident report system. Marcus could see him typing. The sergeant wrote quickly. Suspect became increasingly aggressive. Marcus's expression hardened. Kessler continued. Suspect repeatedly refused lawful commands and made sudden movements during officer safety procedures. Crow moved beside him. Sergeant. What? He didn't make sudden movements. Kessler kept typing. He pulled his arm away. When you reached for his watch. That qualifies. Crow stared at the screen. You're making it sound like he tried to fight you. Kessler stopped typing. He slowly turned his chair. Do you want to have this conversation in front of the prisoner? Marcus answered before Crow could. I'm not a prisoner. I'm a detainee unless you've actually established probable cause. Kessler stood. There. That attitude. Karen looked up again. Marcus remained calm. Knowing the difference between detention and arrest is not attitude. Kessler walked toward him. You think using legal vocabulary makes you special? No. Marcus paused. It makes me concerned that you're avoiding basic legal vocabulary yourself. Crow almost reacted, then caught himself. Kessler's face tightened. Put him in interview 2. Karen frowned. He hasn't finished intake. He can finish later. Marcus was taken into a small room containing a metal table and 3 chairs. The cuffs were removed, but the door remained locked. Marcus rubbed his wrists. A red mark circled each one. He checked the wall clock. 11:47 a.m. His expression changed. Across downtown, another clock displayed the same time inside the federal courthouse. Court Clerk Evelyn Price stood beside a polished wooden bench reviewing the morning calendar. Several attorneys were already gathering outside. One asked, Is he here yet? Evelyn checked her phone. No. That's unusual. Very. She looked toward the empty judge's chair. Back at the station, Marcus waited. 10 minutes became 20, then 30. Finally, Kessler entered carrying a printed report. He dropped it onto the table. Here's where we are. Marcus read the first paragraph. His eyes stopped. You wrote that I became aggressive. You did. No. You raised your voice. I did not. You challenged lawful commands. I asked what crime you suspected me of committing. Kessler leaned forward. That's obstruction when it interferes with an investigation. Marcus studied him for several seconds. Your officer confirmed the motorcycle was legally mine before you searched me. Kessler said nothing. The dispatch timestamp will show exactly when that happened. A flicker crossed Kessler's face. Marcus continued. So will your body camera. Kessler leaned back. You really have an answer for everything. Facts usually do. Kessler gathered the report. You want a lawyer? Yes. Name? I'll make my own call. Kessler smiled. Good luck finding somebody this early. Marcus looked at the clock. 9:26. I won't need long. Several minutes later, Karen escorted Marcus to a telephone. You get one call for now. Thank you. Marcus dialed from memory. The call connected after 2 rings. Federal Courthouse Chambers. Evain. Silence. Then the woman's voice changed instantly. Sir, where are you? Marcus glanced toward Kessler, who was standing far enough away to hear only fragments. I've encountered an unexpected legal matter. Are you all right? I'm fine. We've been trying to reach you. Your phone is temporarily unavailable. Evelyn understood that something was wrong. Do you need assistance? Marcus considered the question. He could end this immediately. One sentence would be enough. Send someone from the courthouse. Tell them who I am. But he looked through the glass partition. Kessler was speaking to Crow. Marcus remembered the roadside, the verified registration, the fabricated suspicion, the handcuffs, and Rebecca's camera. No, Marcus said. Not yet. Evelyn hesitated. The morning calendar begins soon. I know. What should I tell them? Marcus looked at the wall clock. Tell them I'll be late because of an unexpected legal matter. Another pause. Yes, sir. And Evelyn. Yes? Document the time of this call. Her voice became serious. I will. Marcus hung up. Karen stared at him curiously. You work at the courthouse? Marcus gave her a small smile. Yes. What do you do there? Before he could answer, Kessler appeared. Call's over. Marcus stepped away from the telephone. Kessler escorted him back toward interview 2. Karen watched them leave. Something about Marcus bothered her. Not because he seemed dangerous, because he seemed completely comfortable with legal procedure. She returned to her computer and looked at the booking screen. Marcus Ellison. The name felt familiar. Across the room, Crow opened the original dispatch record again. The VIN verification timestamp appeared clearly. 2222. 11 a.m. He opened Kessler's report. According to Kessler's written version, Marcus had become suspicious and aggressive before ownership could be confirmed. Crow stared at both screens. The timeline proved otherwise. Then Kessler approached. Finish your supplemental report. Crow didn't look away from the monitor. What exactly do you want me to write? What happened? Crow finally faced him. Your version? Kessler's voice dropped. Our version. Inside the interview room, Marcus could not hear them, but through the narrow window, he saw Crow's expression. And Marcus knew the younger officer had just been asked to make a choice that could follow him for the rest of his career. Rebecca Sloan watched the patrol cruiser disappear before lowering her phone. Something about Marcus Ellison's final expression stayed with her. He had been angry, but he had never looked afraid. Rebecca immediately saved the video, uploaded a copy to cloud storage, then continued toward work. Less than 2 hours later, she saw a local news alert. The headline described a motorcyclist detained after becoming combative during a traffic investigation. Rebecca stopped walking. Combative? She opened the article. The police statement claimed officers had encountered an uncooperative rider while investigating suspicious circumstances involving an expensive motorcycle. Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. She had watched the entire encounter. Marcus had not threatened anyone. He had not resisted. He had barely raised his voice. Rebecca opened her recording again. There it was. Crow's voice was unmistakable. The bike is registered to Marcus Ellison. No warrants. Nothing. Then Kessler continued the detention anyway. Rebecca forwarded the original video to civil rights attorney Natalie Brooks, whom she knew through a community legal organization. Her message contained only one sentence. You need to see what happened before they rewrite it. At the station, Crow sat alone in the report room. He had not submitted his supplemental report. Instead, he opened his body camera footage. Delapens 11 a.m. Kessler's voice played through the headphones. The VIN? Clean. Run it again. I did. Crow paused the recording. His chest tightened. The evidence was worse than he remembered. He continued. Marcus requesting a supervisor. Kessler refusing. Marcus placing his hands on the cruiser. The search. The watch. The handcuffs. Then the statement that made Crow remove his headphone. You verified the motorcycle? His own recorded voice answered. Yes. Crow leaned back. The room suddenly felt too small. Kessler interrupted. You still working on that? Crow minimized the video. Yes. Shouldn't take this long. Crow looked at him. What do you want me to say? Kessler closed the door. that the suspect was argumentative, repeatedly challenged instructions, made unpredictable movements, and forced us to escalate. That's not what the camera shows. Kessler stared at him. Body cameras don't show everything. This one shows enough. Kessler stepped closer. You think one traffic stop is worth destroying your career? Crow's expression changed. Is that a threat? It's advice. Kessler lowered his voice. Police work depends on officers trusting each other. You start second-guessing your partner every time somebody complains, nobody will ever trust you again. Crow looked toward the computer. And if the report is false? Kessler's eyes hardened. Choose your words carefully. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Crow said, I need more time. Kessler walked out without answering. Inside interview room 2, Marcus sat quietly when Karen Mitchell entered. You're being released. Marcus looked at the clock. Nearly 3 hours had passed. Charges? No formal criminal charge at this time. Marcus stood. Then why was I held? Karen hesitated. I can only tell you what's in the system. Marcus understood. What about the citation? Sergeant Kessler is preparing one. For what? Karen looked uncomfortable. Failure to obey a lawful direction. Marcus almost smiled. Of course. At the property counter, Karen returned his belongings. Wallet, keys, phone, silver watch. Marcus picked up the watch first. A fresh scratch crossed the metal casing. His thumb moved over it. For a moment, his face softened. Karen noticed. Your father's? Marcus looked up. Yes, I heard you mention it. Marcus fastened the watch around his wrist. He wore it for 32 years. I'm sorry it was damaged. Marcus shook his head. Things can be repaired. Then he looked toward Kessler. Records are harder. Kessler approached carrying paperwork. Sign here. Marcus read every line. You've cited me for failing to obey an order after ownership of the motorcycle had already been verified. You can argue it in court. Marcus raised his eyes. I suspect somebody will. He signed only where required and requested copies of everything. Kessler shoved them toward him. Your bike is at impound. Release authorization? You can deal with them. Marcus calmly placed the documents inside an envelope. No threats. No revelation. Nothing Kessler could use. Then Marcus walked outside. A dark sedan waited near the entrance. A gray-haired man in a suit stepped out and opened the rear door. Mr. Ellison. Marcus nodded. Kessler watched from behind the glass. Who's that? He asked. Karen shook her head. Crow, however, was already typing. Marcus Ellison, Maryland. Federal Courthouse. Before the search results fully loaded, Kessler called his name. Crow. Crow quickly closed the browser. Outside, Marcus entered the sedan. Courthouse? The driver asked. Yes. Marcus looked at his watch. We're very late. The sedan pulled away. Back inside, Crow reopened the search. Before he could read the first result, his phone rang. Rebecca's video had reached Natalie Brooks. Natalie had already preserved a copy. And across downtown, courthouse staff were quietly reorganizing an entire morning calendar around the unexplained absence of one man. Marcus looked through the sedan window as the federal courthouse appeared ahead. He could have revealed everything hours ago. He had chosen not to. Because the most important question was no longer what Kessler would do after learning Marcus's title. It was what Kessler had already done when he believed Marcus had none. Sergeant Travis Kessler knew something was wrong before anyone said it aloud. The dark sedan that had collected Marcus Ellison bothered him. So did Marcus's calmness. Most people became frightened after several hours in custody. Marcus had walked out as though the station were merely an inconvenience he intended to document. Kessler returned to Crow's desk. Report. Crow looked at the unfinished document. I'm still reviewing the footage. There's nothing to review. There is if you want the report to match what happened. Kessler pulled a chair beside him. Listen carefully. Ellison challenged instructions from the beginning. He refused to cooperate, interfered with the investigation, and made movements that created an officer safety concern. Crow stared at him. The VIN came back clean before you searched him. That doesn't matter. It matters to the timeline. Kessler leaned closer. You know what matters? Whether your partner can trust you when things get ugly. Crow's jaw tightened. You want me to sign something I know is inaccurate. I want you to understand how this profession works. No. The word surprised both men. Kessler slowly stood. What? I'm not signing that version. Kessler's expression became cold. I trained you. I know. I defended you when you made mistakes. I know. And now you're going to throw me under the bus for some guy on a motorcycle? Crow shook his head. This isn't about him. Then what is it about? Crow looked toward the body camera file on his screen. What the camera shows. Kessler bent down until his face was inches from Crow's. You think the department is going to choose a civilian over an 18-year sergeant? Crow said nothing. You think supervisors will trust an officer who turns on his own partner? Still nothing. Kessler straightened. Sign the report, Dillon. Crow looked at the signature field. Then he closed the document. No. Kessler's face hardened. You just made the biggest mistake of your career. Across town, Marcus's sedan stopped beneath the stone facade of the federal courthouse. Marcus stepped onto the sidewalk. The marks from the handcuffs remained visible around his wrists. He looked at them once, then entered. Security officer Samuel Price saw him first. His eyes widened. Sir, we've been... Marcus raised one hand gently. Later, Sam. Yes, sir. Another employee approached. Mr. Ellison Evelyn is waiting upstairs. Marcus nodded. Nobody asked why he was late. Nobody asked why his motorcycle jacket was wrinkled. But several people noticed his wrists. Marcus entered a private office near the courtroom. Evelyn Price stood immediately. What happened? Marcus placed the citation and released documents on her desk. I was detained. Her expression froze. By police? Yes. Do they know? Marcus removed his jacket. No. Evelyn stared at him. You didn't tell them? I provided my identification. That's not what I mean. I know. Marcus looked toward the window. If I had announced my position, the encounter would have changed. Exactly. And that's the problem. Evelyn fell silent. Marcus turned back toward her. I needed to know how far they would go when they believed I was simply another citizen with no influence. And? Marcus looked at the red marks around his wrists. Far enough. His phone vibrated. Natalie Brooks had left a message. Marcus listened. Mr. Ellison, my name is Natalie Brooks. A witness sent me a complete recording of your traffic stop. You need to see it before the official version changes any further. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Rebecca had kept her promise. At the station, Kessler received a call from a lieutenant. When it ended, his expression had changed. Crow noticed. What? Kessler grabbed his jacket. We've been ordered to appear downtown. Where? Kessler hesitated. Federal courthouse. Crow stared at him. For Ellison? Apparently, his citation created some procedural issue. Crow's stomach tightened. Kessler scoffed. He probably hired some expensive attorney before he left the parking lot. Crow remembered the search he had started earlier. Marcus Ellison. Federal courthouse. He reached for the computer. Kessler snapped his fingers. Move. 30 minutes later, both officers entered the courthouse. Kessler wore the confidence of a man who believed the building itself would validate him. Crow felt something entirely different. Federal security officers checked their credentials. One looked at Kessler's name longer than expected. Courtroom 4. Kessler frowned. This is about the traffic citation? Courtroom 4. They continued upstairs. When the courtroom doors opened, Kessler spotted Marcus immediately. He was standing near the front beside Evelyn. His motorcycle jacket was gone. He now wore a crisp white shirt and dark suit. Kessler laughed quietly. Look at that. Crow didn't respond. Guy gets arrested once and suddenly dresses like a lawyer. Marcus turned. His eyes met Crow's first. Then Kessler's. There was no triumph in his expression. That unsettled Crow more than anger would have. Kessler walked closer. You really went all the way with this, didn't you? Marcus said nothing. Dragged us into federal court because you couldn't handle a traffic stop? Evelyn stared at Kessler in disbelief. Marcus remained composed. You should take your seat, Sergeant. Kessler smirked, still giving orders. Crow noticed two federal marshals near the wall. Both were watching Marcus, not suspiciously, respectfully. Kessler leaned toward Crow. He really thinks this room is going to save him. Crow finally looked at him. Sergeant. What? Crow glanced toward Marcus. I think you should stop talking. Kessler laughed. You getting scared now? Yes. That answer wiped the smile from Kessler's face. Before he could respond, a side door opened. Attorneys began moving toward their tables. Conversations died. Marcus picked up a black judicial robe from a chair partially hidden behind the railing. Crow saw it. His face drained of color. Kessler had not noticed. He was still looking through paperwork. Then the court officer stepped forward. All rise. Chairs moved across the floor. Federal marshals stood. Attorneys stood. Evelyn stood. Crow slowly rose. Kessler looked around, confused. Then he saw Marcus walking toward the bench. Why is he going up there? Kessler whispered. Crow could barely answer. I think we just found out who we handcuffed. Marcus stopped before the elevated bench. The courtroom fell completely silent. Kessler stared at him. For the first time since the traffic stop began, Sergeant Travis Kessler looked genuinely afraid, and the clerk had not even announced Marcus Ellison's name yet. All rise. The command echoed through courtroom 4. Sergeant Travis Kessler stood slowly. His eyes never left Marcus Ellison. Around him, every attorney was already on their feet. Federal marshals straightened beside the walls. Court employees faced the bench with practiced respect. Marcus walked forward. Kessler leaned toward Crow. "What is happening?" Crow didn't answer. He couldn't. Marcus reached the steps leading to the bench. Only then did Kessler notice the black judicial robe folded over Marcus's arm. His face changed. "No." The word escaped almost silently. Marcus paused. For a moment, he looked down at the old silver watch on his wrist. The scratch Kessler's handling had left across its casing caught the courtroom lights. And suddenly Marcus wasn't standing in a federal courthouse. He was 11 years old again. His father Raymond stood beside an old Chevrolet on a dark Baltimore street. Hands on the roof, police lights flashing, a frightened boy watching through the passenger window. Marcus remembered the officer searching Raymond's car. He remembered groceries being thrown onto the pavement. He remembered his father being questioned as though simply owning the vehicle required an explanation. Then came the memory Marcus had never forgotten. One officer finally checked the information properly. Wrong man, wrong vehicle, no warrant, no crime. Raymond had been released. No apology followed. On the drive home, young Marcus had asked why his father hadn't shouted at them. Raymond kept his eyes on the road. "Because anger might tell them how hurt I am," he said, "but truth tells everyone what they did." Years later, those words had helped Marcus survive law school, courtrooms, threats, defeats, and victories. Now they returned when he needed them most. Marcus lifted his eyes. Kessler stood only yards away. The same man who had questioned whether Marcus could own an expensive motorcycle. The same man who had continued the detention after the VIN came back clean. The same man who had taken Raymond's watch and mocked it. Marcus felt anger. Deep anger, but beneath it was something stronger. Responsibility. He could not allow this moment to become revenge. Crow stared at Marcus. Pieces were connecting rapidly. The legal vocabulary, the controlled demeanor, the call to the courthouse, the set-in, the employees addressing Marcus with quiet respect. Crow looked at Kessler. "Sergeant." Kessler shook his head. "No." Marcus stepped behind the bench. Kessler's breathing became shallow. "He can't be." Crow whispered, "I think he is." The clerk moved toward the center of the courtroom. Marcus unfolded the robe. He slipped one arm into it, then the other. Kessler's face drained completely. That morning, he had looked at Marcus and seen a black man on an expensive motorcycle who, in his mind, needed to explain why he belonged there. Now the same man stood beneath the seal of a federal courtroom, but the official announcement still had not come. Marcus adjusted the robe. His fingers briefly touched his father's watch. Evelyn Price looked toward him. Marcus gave the smallest nod. The clerk opened the docket. Kessler suddenly stepped toward Crow. "We need to leave." Crow stared at him. "What?" "We were told to appear. We appeared. Let's go." A federal marshal near the aisle shifted position. "Please remain where you are, Sergeant." Kessler stopped. "I have duties elsewhere. You were instructed to remain for the opening of the proceeding." Kessler looked toward the door. For perhaps the first time in 18 years of police work, a command had been given to him that he could not simply override. Crow lowered his voice. "You told me the truth didn't matter once the report was written." Kessler glared at him. "I never said that." Crow's expression hardened. "Your camera may remember differently." Kessler froze. Marcus saw the exchange. He said nothing. The courtroom became completely silent. The clerk looked toward the gallery. Kessler's mind raced desperately. Maybe Marcus was an attorney. Maybe he worked for a judge. Maybe the robe belonged to someone else. Anything was possible except the conclusion standing directly before him. Then Marcus placed both hands on the bench. The gesture was calm, familiar, natural. Crow swallowed. He remembered Marcus sitting handcuffed in the back seat. From the moment your officer confirmed that VIN, every decision you made left a trail. At the time, Crow had thought it was a warning. Now he understood. Marcus had not been threatening them with influence. He had been describing evidence, timestamps, body camera footage, dispatch records, witness video, written reports, facts. Kessler looked around the courtroom. Several attorneys were watching him now. He suddenly felt exposed, not because everyone knew what he had done, not yet, but because Marcus knew. Crow knew. Rebecca's camera knew. And somewhere inside the department's servers, the truth existed independently of whatever Kessler had typed into his report. The clerk took a breath. Marcus looked once more at Raymond's watch. He remembered his father's voice. "Dignity is what you keep when somebody else decides you don't deserve any." Marcus raised his head. His eyes settled briefly on Kessler. There was no smile, no satisfaction, only a quiet seriousness that frightened Kessler more than rage ever could. The clerk began. All rise. The United States District Court is now in session. Kessler's fingers tightened around the back of the chair in front of him. Crow stared toward the bench. The next words would remove the final doubt. And when Marcus Ellison's title was spoken aloud, Kessler would finally understand that his greatest mistake was not handcuffing an important man. It was believing an ordinary man would have deserved it. All rise. The United States District Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Marcus Ellison presiding. The words landed like a hammer. Sergeant Travis Kessler stopped breathing. Officer Dylan Crow slowly turned toward him. Kessler's face had gone completely pale. At the front of the courtroom, Marcus Ellison stood behind the federal bench wearing the black judicial robe. The same black man Kessler had questioned beside a Ducati. The same man he had searched after the registration came back clean. The same man he had handcuffed. The same man whose father's watch he had mocked. "Judge," Kessler whispered. Crow said nothing. Marcus looked across the courtroom. "Please be seated." Everyone sat. Kessler remained standing for another second before his knees seemed to remember how to move. He dropped into his chair. Marcus opened the file before him. Then he stopped. "There is a matter that must be addressed before this court proceeds." Kessler swallowed. Marcus continued calmly. "This morning I became personally involved in an encounter with two members of local law enforcement." A murmur moved through the gallery. Kessler looked toward the door. The marshal remained beside it. "Because I am personally involved," Marcus said, "I will not preside over any proceeding concerning that encounter, any citation arising from it, or any subsequent allegation connected to it." Kessler blinked. He had expected revenge. Marcus was doing the opposite. "I will recuse myself from those matters. Any evidence requiring review will be referred through the appropriate independent process." Marcus looked directly at Kessler. "My position does not entitle me to special justice." A pause. "But neither does anyone else's position entitle them to escape accountability." Crow lowered his eyes. Kessler's hands tightened beneath the table. Marcus then turned to the clerk. "Please enter the recusal notice." "Yes, Your Honor." Those two words seemed to hit Kessler harder than the announcement. "Your Honor." Hours earlier, he had told Marcus to save his speeches for the courtroom. Now, Marcus owned no part of the room personally, yet commanded it through the office Kessler had never imagined he held. The consequences did not arrive instantly. They arrived through evidence. By afternoon, Rebecca Sloan sat inside an independent investigator's office with her phone on the table. "This is the original?" the investigator asked. "Yes." "Edited?" "No." Rebecca opened the file. The video began. Kessler's voice filled the room. Then Crow's. "The bike is registered to Marcus Ellison." The investigator paused the footage. "What time was this?" Rebecca pointed to the metadata. "Right there. Delapan 12 a.m. Next came dispatch records. The first database response had arrived at 8:11. Valid registration, no active warrant, no stolen vehicle report. Then came Crow's body camera footage. The audio was even clearer. "The VIN? Clean. Run it again." "I did." The investigator wrote something down. The video continued. Marcus requested a supervisor. Once, twice, 3 times. Then came the search, the watch, the handcuffs. Finally, investigators compared the footage with Kessler's report. The discrepancy was immediate. Kessler had written that Marcus displayed escalating aggression while ownership remained uncertain. The timestamps showed ownership had already been confirmed. He had written that Marcus made sudden movements, creating an officer safety concern. Rebecca's video showed Marcus standing against the cruiser while Kessler removed his father's watch. Then investigators interviewed Crow. He sat alone at a metal table. A recorder was placed between him and 2 investigators. Did Sergeant Kessler know the vehicle was legally registered to Judge Ellison before the arrest? Crow stared at the recorder. This was the moment Kessler had warned him about. Career, loyalty, trust, blue line. Crow took a breath. "Yes." "Did you tell him?" "Yes." "How many times?" "At least twice." "Were you asked to prepare a report describing Judge Ellison as aggressive?" Crow's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Was that description accurate?" "Silence." Crow thought about Marcus looking at him beside the cruiser, not accusing him, simply asking him to tell the truth. "No." The investigator leaned forward. "What did you do?" "I refused to sign it." That answer changed the investigation. Internal auditors expanded the review. They searched Kessler's previous complaints. 1 appeared, then another, then 7. Motorists describing stops that continued after suspicions had been cleared. Citizens claiming reports exaggerated their behavior. Complaints dismissed because evidence was considered insufficient. One involved a delivery driver. Another involved a college professor. Another involved a retired mechanic stopped in a neighborhood where Kessler decided his presence looked suspicious. None of those people had been federal judges. None had walked into a courtroom where everyone stood. Marcus read the preliminary findings days later inside his chambers. Evelyn stood nearby. "You were right," she said quietly. Marcus looked up. "About what?" "This was bigger than your stop." Marcus closed the file. "It always was." Evelyn looked at the damaged watch on his wrist. "You could have ended it the moment they stopped you." Marcus shook his head. "I could have ended what was happening to me." He looked toward the courthouse window. "That isn't the same thing." Meanwhile, Kessler sat across from investigators. His badge and service weapon had already been temporarily surrendered pending review. He tried to explain. The man was argumentative. An investigator slid a transcript across the table. "Where?" Kessler looked down. "He challenged my authority." "Where?" "Another page." He made suspicious movements. The investigator placed Rebecca's video beside the transcript. "Show us." Kessler said nothing. Then came the question he could not escape. When Officer Crow informed you the VIN was clean and the registered owner was Marcus Ellison, what lawful suspicion justified extending the stop? Kessler opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time, there was no report he could rewrite. No younger officer he could pressure. No citizen he could intimidate. Only evidence. Later that evening, Marcus stood alone in his chambers. He removed Raymond's watch and placed it carefully on the desk. His thumb traced the new scratch. The courtroom reveal had shocked Kessler. But Marcus knew that was never the real victory. If justice depended on discovering that the man in handcuffs was a federal judge, then justice had failed before it began. The real test would come next. Not whether the system could protect Judge Marcus Ellison, but whether it could finally protect the next person Sergeant Travis Kessler might have decided did not belong. And that answer was about to determine whether the badge Kessler had used for 18 years would ever return to his chest. 3 weeks later, Sergeant Travis Kessler returned to police headquarters without his uniform. No badge rested on his chest. No service weapon hung at his side. He wore a gray suit and carried a thin folder containing the findings of the independent investigation. The evidence had been overwhelming. Body camera footage proved he continued Marcus Ellison's detention after the Ducati's ownership had been verified. Dispatch records confirmed the exact timestamp. Rebecca Sloan's recording contradicted his description of Marcus as aggressive. Crow's testimony established that Kessler knew the motorcycle was clean before placing Marcus in handcuffs. But investigators had found something even more troubling. 7 previous complaints showed similar patterns. Drivers detained after suspicions disappeared. Citizens described as hostile after questioning officers. Reports whose language seemed designed to justify actions after they occurred. Cases once dismissed individually now formed a pattern impossible to ignore. Following the formal disciplinary process, Kessler was terminated. When he surrendered the last department property in his possession, nobody applauded. Marcus would not have wanted them to. Accountability was not entertainment. It was responsibility. Officer Dylan Crow faced consequences too. Investigators concluded that although he had challenged Kessler and ultimately refused to sign a false report, he had initially remained silent while an unlawful situation escalated. Crow accepted the finding. "I should have spoken sooner," he told the review board. That admission mattered. He remained employed under disciplinary supervision and mandatory retraining, but his testimony helped reopen several earlier complaints. For the first time, people who had once believed nobody would listen received phone calls telling them their cases were being reviewed again. The department announced new procedures. Body camera footage from disputed stops would receive independent supervisory review. Officers would be required to document when the original basis for a traffic detention had been resolved. Complaints involving conflicting officer and civilian accounts could no longer be closed without reviewing available digital evidence. None of those changes erased what happened, but they made repeating it harder. Rebecca learned about Kessler's termination through Natalie Brooks. Days later, Rebecca received an invitation to the federal courthouse. Marcus met her in a quiet conference room. He wore a dark suit. The silver watch remained on his wrist. "I wanted to thank you personally," he said. Rebecca shook her head. "I only recorded what happened." "You did more than that." Marcus looked at her. "You stayed." Rebecca remembered Kessler ordering her away. "I almost didn't." "But you did." Marcus touched the watch. "Systems depend on records. Sometimes a record exists because one person decides not to look away." Rebecca smiled. "I'm glad I didn't." "Suwangi." Later that afternoon, Marcus visited the impound facility. His Ducati Panigale waited near the back. There were minor marks from transportation, but the motorcycle was intact. Marcus ran his hand across the fuel tank. For the first time since the traffic stop, he smiled. He rode somewhere he had not visited in months. An old brick garage stood on the edge of Baltimore. The business had belonged to Raymond Ellison. After Raymond died, Marcus kept the building even though the repair shop had closed. Inside, old tools still hung above the workbench. Marcus parked the Ducati where his father once kept an aging motorcycle. He removed the silver watch. Under the work light, the fresh scratch was clearly visible. Marcus opened a drawer and found a small polishing cloth. He worked slowly. The scratch did not disappear completely. Marcus stopped trying. Some marks were not meant to vanish. They reminded people what had happened. He remembered Raymond's voice. Dignity is what you keep when somebody else decides you don't deserve any. Marcus fastened the watch around his wrist again. Still keeping me on time, Dad. A month later, Marcus stood before a group of law students at a university auditorium. The story of his arrest had spread far beyond Maryland. People expected him to discuss being mistaken for an ordinary citizen. Instead, Marcus challenged the premise. The disturbing part of what happened to me, he told them, was never that officers failed to recognize a federal judge. The room became silent. The disturbing part was that anyone believed my title should have changed how I deserved to be treated. Students leaned forward. Marcus continued. If I had announced my position beside that road, perhaps the handcuffs would never have closed. He paused. But imagine I had been a mechanic. Raymond came immediately to his mind. Imagine I had been a teacher, delivery driver, construction worker, college student, or unemployed man, simply riding a motorcycle he legally owned. Marcus looked across the auditorium. Would the facts have been different? Nobody answered. No. His voice strengthened. The Constitution does not become more powerful because someone important invokes it. Marcus glanced at the watch. Justice means the person nobody recognizes receives the same dignity as the person whose name makes an entire courtroom stand. The auditorium erupted in applause. Marcus waited until it faded. There is another lesson. He thought about Crow. Wrongdoing survives not only because someone chooses to abuse authority, sometimes it survives because decent people see it happening and decide silence is safer. Several students lowered their eyes. Officer Crow eventually told the truth. That mattered. But courage delayed can still leave someone in handcuffs. After the speech, Marcus returned to the courthouse. His work continued. There was no dramatic celebration, no special escort, no desire for revenge. Weeks later, on a clear Saturday morning, Marcus opened his garage. The Ducati waited inside. He pulled on the same simple motorcycle jacket, fastened his father's watch, started the engine. Then he rode into the city. At a traffic light, a little boy in the passenger seat of a nearby car stared excitedly at the Ducati. Marcus smiled and gave him a small wave. The boy waved back. The light turned green. Marcus accelerated gently. No one watching him knew he was a federal judge. And for Marcus, that was precisely the point. At that intersection, he was simply a black man riding a motorcycle he legally owned. He deserved no more dignity because of the robe waiting in his chambers, and no less because he had left it behind. Justice had finally reached Travis Kessler, but the greater victory was the principle left standing after the courtroom emptied. A person's worth should never have to be revealed before it is respected. Real dignity does not come from a title, uniform, wealth, or the power to make a courtroom stand. It belongs to every person before anyone knows their name. And justice becomes stronger whenever ordinary people refuse to stay silent when truth is being buried. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories about dignity, courage, and justice.